You are listening to the It's Your Time podcast, and I'm your host, Certified Life Coach Michelle Arnold Burke. In today's episode, I'm sharing a recent conversation with Board-Certified Hypnotist Penny Chiasson, where we discussed the importance of identity work and self-trust. Welcome to the It's Your Time podcast, the podcast where busy professionals like you get the practical solutions and support you need to gain control of your schedule so you can strive to be the best in your career, but without the stress and overwhelm. If you're looking to increase your energy and decrease your stress, you are in the right place. Hello. Welcome back to the podcast, friends. Okay, I have such a fun interview that I am sharing with you today because today I am sharing information from the hypnotist that I work with. And it's so funny because Mark was like, you should not say that out loud. You should not tell anybody. You should just keep that to yourself. Everyone's going to think you're crazy. And I'm like, heck, everyone knows I'm crazy, Aunt Michelle. Let's just take it to the next level, right? But seriously, this is such great information that Penny has to share. And you'll notice it's actually a little bit longer. I feel so privileged that she took the time to really kind of dig into the science behind hypnosis. And we talked a little bit about pain management, which sometimes I get off on a tangent. It's totally fine. In fact, I just took my nieces to Salem, our nieces to Salem, where we learned about the witch trials. Super interesting if you haven't been there. But in the weekend or over the weekend, my phone was dying so quickly. And the girls were like, you have 102 tabs open. What is going on? I'm like, yes, welcome to my life. So I digress. The important part is this is not crazy. This is science-backed. In fact, Penny comes from a background of anesthesia, which was one of the things that drew me to her immediately. I find it so fascinating. So we talked about the importance of doing identity work, which I always talk about how we need to be aware of what our thoughts are, but sometimes they are so deep that we are not even aware of them to make the changes. And so she talks about that. We talked about the importance of self-trust and really making lasting change in your life. So without further ado, please take a listen. Okay, this is going to be so much fun. Thank you for being here. Can we get started with you introducing yourself in a way that you most enjoy?
Hey, Michelle. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I just love synchronicities in life and your background of what you do because my name's Penny. And for 25 years, I was in nursing and nurse anesthesia for 15 of that time. And now I have the fun life of being able to follow my passion, which is helping others to live most authentically to themselves. Now, that's a little bit of a buzzword. What does that really mean? I help people to no longer be frustrated with themselves, to no longer doubt themselves, to stop that internal chatter that crops up even when everything in life is going well. So I just want people to love themselves more and to trust themselves and to feel enough just in who they are without needing anything outside of them to do it. Yes, I'm a
Yeah.
hypnotist, but yes, I get tongue-tied too.
That means you're human. Good.
Yes. So I've been in hypnosis since 2013 and specifically this deep personal development work since 2018.
It's so good. And I already have the thought that the folks that do anesthesia that are behind that curtain are the most important people. And I didn't realize it until I've been in the OR so long that I'm like, yes, they put you to sleep, but more importantly, they also wake you up. So I think like it's such an interesting piece because you are really waking people up now through the hypnosis work is what I think.
Yeah. So your listeners aren't familiar with me. I'm a very spiritual person, and part of learning to trust ourselves and love ourselves and know that we are enough, that really is waking up to the true nature of ourselves. People talk about spiritual awakening. That's what the awakening really is recognizing that your external world doesn't define who you are on the inside.
I think that's such an important piece for people to hear because I know for even myself, right? Like, so often we look for external validation, whether it's from parents or school, or if we're in sales, the quotas, the numbers, the boss, like all of the external. And I feel so lucky to have you in my life to do this work on the hypnosis part to go deeper. And I'll just tell a quick funny story that we were just talking about before we started recording. When I was telling my husband that I was doing this interview, he doesn't think that he can be hypnotized, but then when I went on to tell him that I do your replay of the class just about every day, give or take, he was like, "You shouldn't say that out loud. You should not tell people. They're gonna think you're out there." So I think a good starting point is, like, if we just kinda set the foundation of hypnosis, like, you don't have us out there on stage doing, like, chicken clucking.
No, no. And I have a funny story around that that proves that you don't even need hypnosis to influence someone to do something like that. But in all seriousness, I discovered hypnosis in 2007, 2008 when I was pulling together a CE course for acute care nurses for pain management. And I mean, your people have a background in pain, so you're going to understand this. There's something called the post sedation scale. And when someone is too sedated for pain medications, what are you left with? So that's the part of the presentation. I was doing a literature review to find what was out there, and I was positively floored to find the mountain, and I mean a mountain of evidence supporting hypnosis for surgical pain and chronic pain. It has been so well studied that in 2002, Anesthesia and Analgesia did a meta analysis of all the pain studies since the 1980s. And people who have some form of hypnosis, whether it's an audio, an in person session the day of or the week before, it didn't matter. The people who had some form of hypnosis did better than 89% of people who did not have hypnosis. We're talking comfort levels, stress levels decreased, and decreases in nausea, vomiting post surgery. It's mind blowing what's out there. But then the other two most commonly studied areas are gut related symptoms, think IBS, ulcerative colitis, inflammatory bowel disease, and Crohn's. And the other one is symptoms associated with PTSD.
Mm.
So those are the top three most studied areas. The issue with hypnosis is for a couple of decades, they spent time using fMRI. They were wanting to define what it is. And while nobody can exactly define what it is, they've concretely determined that there are certain areas of the brain that are more active in the hypnotic state than when not in the hypnotic state. And they've taken people into hypnosis and applied painful stimulus while they were doing an fMRI and compared them to people who were just imagining a painful stimulus. And then they compared it to people in hypnosis where they gave them the suggestion that there was a painful stimulus. The people who had the actual painful stimulus and the people who in hypnosis received the suggestion, very distinct areas of the brain lit up, whereas people who imagined it, it did not. So just kind of put that in your pipe and smoke it
What?
a little bit. It's
Yes.
just amazing what the brain can do. So when people, I mean, I get it. Stage shows, Hollywood, TV, we get all this stuff. And there are people who want to do it for entertainment, and there's no issue with that. But there is a very valid, well researched and studied, legitimate use for us to tap into the power of our mind to make our lives better.
I did not realize all of the science behind it specific to pain. That is exactly what I've been doing for 19 years. And I always do say, like, I kind of have an idea when I meet a patient for the first time, if they come in and they're like, this is not going to work, nothing ever does, like kind of the mindset. And I get it. You know, we're kind of the end of the spectrum for helping these people. And I always pay attention to like what the mindset is. But I feel like this is even deeper level, what you're talking about when we bring in the hypnosis part.
Yeah, I've been doing some more literature review just in the last week or two around more updated models around pain. And that self-talk becomes a whole nocebo effect. If they tell themselves it's not gonna work, it's not gonna work. And, it's really a delicate situation because most physicians who have heard of things like, hypnosis, they think it's placebo. They think that it means that it's all in the patient's head. When they hear about psychosomatic pain, they think that means the patient's just making it up and they can just change their mind and not do it anymore. And that's not true. Psychosomatic means there's something much deeper than thought or conscious choice at play, but we can tap into the mind to shift all of those things. And so imagine if hypnosis can help you to shift wiring in your brain around a very physical experience like that. Imagine what it can do to just simply help you to feel happier, have less self doubt, and just to trust yourself more because all of that is accessible in hypnosis.
Yeah, that's so fascinating, and it's a little bit, this is a little bit of a turn of what I thought I'd be talking to you, but we'll come back to it because I just find this so interesting. What we do is spinal cord stim, and so we're interrupting pain signals as they make their way to the brain. So what you're talking about is changing brain signals, it sounds like, and it's kind of blowing my mind a little bit because it seems like it totally would make sense.
Yeah, hypnosis is so potent for pain relief that if you're not a clinician directly involved in the pain care, you to cover yourself, you pretty much have to have a referral from the doctor. I teach other hypnotists how to do pain management hypnosis. And one of my students that graduated my program went and did my pain course. And I did an interview with her. She goes, "Do you know I used your pain techniques with one of my clients?" The client had ankylosing spondylitis and was having some degeneration and was having some neuropathic pain. And the hypnosis around that did such a good job. They were just turning it down. But the client kept using the self hypnosis on herself. She ended up blocking her pain signals, and she was actually having more degenerative changes in her spine. So the girl hypnotized her to reverse the suggestion because she was afraid she was going to really end up with nerve compression and not
Oh.
know it. Now, this person was not a clinical person. I know that over the years I've seen people that were in really interesting situations and didn't have any impediments and they weren't having pain, and you're looking at their x-rays or scans going, how are you not screaming off the bed? Oh, I'm fine, doc. I still walk my dog and I do this and I do that. So while not all pain is rooted in emotion, there's an emotional experience to all pain. Even if it's a real pain from a cut or a surgery or a broken bone, it's real pain, but there's going to be an emotional component to that. So I think where we see the varying responses to treatments, like you said, the person who comes in and said, "Oh, this isn't going to work. This is never going to work." Those very statements are an amplifier for pain. It
And I
literally turns it up in the brain.
Yeah, and you talk about, like, the self-talk, and we've talked about the identity work, and I think sometimes people come in, and a lot of the identity is as the pain patient. So I think, like, I see where this can tie us back and bring us to the identity work of the transformation that you talk about, and I love mindset. This is where I started all of it, and I still stand by it, but this is much deeper, the work that you do. So can you maybe talk a little bit about the personal transformations that folks can have with hypnosis?
Yeah, so, it depends on what someone's coming in for, the approach that I take to it, but most of my clients have done a lot of self-development work. They've made a lot of headway, but they see there's this continual repeating pattern that no matter how much work they've done, even though maybe it doesn't happen as frequently, they're just done with it. They're like, "There's still something here, and I just wanna move past this in my life." And what we do is I start with something called an identity matrix, where I get them to tell me about this pattern, where it has shown up, what's triggered it in the past, what still triggers it, and where they want to go. What would you like for your life to look at? And I look for the themes that run through those two things. And I look for what I see is the common denominator. And I'll start to ask questions about that common denominator. And once we've identified that main thread, usually like 30 minutes on the first call, we're doing this. Then we dive in and we use something called emotional resonance because we have feelings around these things. What is the emotional resonance around this common thread of limiting belief you have coming up, or this common thread of needing to seek external validation or people pleasing when you know it's not serving you? Because when you can follow that feeling back, you will discover the original thought that created the feeling that led to the behavior of needing to modify who you are to fit into the world that you're in. And then we shift the perception. You know, they say hindsight's 20/20. So we shift the perception around that event. And when you shift the perception around that event, then the belief that everything else was stacked on crumbles. And we can begin to lay the foundations of the identity that's true about the client. Because the truth is, and I've had people come to me who were psychiatrists that this just made them like, they felt like they had spiders crawling down their back for me to say this. We all came into this world worthy and good enough and lovable. And depending on our experiences, we may internalize into us that we're not lovable or that we're not worthy, that something must be wrong with us. And I think the biggest thing is, I don't know. I mean, I lived in Connecticut for 20 years in New England, but I didn't go to church there. But I know how it was growing up in church here in the South in the Bible Belt. You're a sinner. You're born not good enough and not worthy. So there are people that have this attached to their identity that they're not worthy, and they always have to be seeking to do something to be good enough to get through the gates of the kingdom of heaven. And I'm not bashing that. That's literally what they're taught. That's what I was taught. We're not inherently bad. Sometimes we make choices that probably aren't the best choices. We have free will when we come here. And so when we can realize that it wasn't us, and you know what, maybe somewhere along the way in life we did make a bad choice, we can forgive ourselves for that.
Right.
Right? Then we can really begin to shift a lot of things. I kind of went off the rails there for
No, I think that's so great.
happy to go wherever you want to go.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's so much goodness there. I think when you talk about like hindsight, what I find, and correct me if I'm wrong, when I'm doing this work, I may think I'm going into it with this, quote unquote problem that I want to try to correct. And when I start to do the hypnosis, it goes way deeper. Like I might think it's something that I have going on with, a coworker or my husband, and I'm doing stuff and it's like when I was a 4-year-old that's coming up. Like, wait a second.
Yeah. So the thing about that is when we have a pattern of behavior like that, or a pattern of thought, sometimes those patterns are tied to our essential protective mechanisms. Think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have to be safe and secure. We have to have shelter. We have to have food. And then, we move on to relationships and on up the triangle there. If our brain attaches something to one of those deep core needs around feeling safe and secure, or having that connection to family or to survival, your conscious mind is not going to see it. It is going to run interference everywhere to keep you from seeing what's really there. And that's the beauty of hypnosis. And there's something that I've said so many times, and she's going to be coming on my podcast soon. Her name's Michelle Colt. She heard me say this once and she goes, "Oh my God, I love that you say this. You were the first person that I've really heard say this on repeat, and you get it. The mind is not going to change until it feels safe to change. So, the very nature that when you're doing the self hypnosis work from what you've done with me, and that you're seeing that 4-year-old pop up, that's your mind recognizing, okay, it's safe to let this go now. Let's let this bubble up process and just dissolve away.
Mm,
And that's absolutely beautiful, but sometimes it takes that one-on-one work to really understand what's going on, because many times what we think it is and what it actually is, it seems like they're football fields apart, but then once the change happens, it was like, "Oh my god, you mean that is what has been driving this my entire life? I feel ridiculous." I said, "Don't feel ridiculous. It was a 3-year-old that took on that belief."
right.
And that formed your personality. You have 0 control over that, so just let it go.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I think that's why this work is so important because you can do when I started like models, right? Like looking at what your thought was, your feeling, your action, your result, all that. And again, I still think that's super important. But when I look at not even having the awareness around what it is that I should be trying to change my mindset on, like that's where this shift I think is so important for people.
I think one of the easiest things people can do, if you find something bubbling up and it's frustrating you and it's irritating you, um, generally the first answer, even the second and the third answer our mind is gonna give us is complete BS and fluff because of that protective mechanism. So you can ask yourself, "What is it about this right now that causes me to feel blank?" And then go 7 layers deep. Whatever the answer is, and say, "Okay, well, what is it about that that's bothering me? Or how is this connected to that?" And just go deeper, and you will hit on something sooner or later that's close to the source. And in some cases, maybe even the source if it's not tied to one of those deep protective mechanisms.
Hmm. Okay, that's interesting. I think that's great for people to try out. And you mentioned the identity and the spirituality component. I think another area that we look at is around wealth. And I know a lot of the work that you do in Kathy's group is around that idea of like changing what wealth can mean. I think there's so many. I know growing up, right? You have to work hard to get money, and money is not. It's almost like you're more noble if you don't have as much money. And I think that for a lot of people needs to be shifted. And I would love for more good women to have more money in the world. So, can you maybe talk about what you see with clients that you work with around money mindset and belief?
A lot of times what we think it is, it isn't. Again, I mean, a lot of people go right for the "you don't feel worthy if you don't have money." Well, that can be one thing. We can get into the whole "who am I," right? Who am I to do this? Who am I to have money? But I will give you a list of different examples from over the years of money and where it stemmed from, because you have to think about the fact that our brain has adaptive behaviors, and it uses those adaptive behaviors to survive. And it knows within a certain framework, it knows how to operate. So I had one situation where I worked with a client that growing up, the parents were both addicts. This person was doing well. In 1 month, they would bring in 5 figures, and then the next month, 0. 1 month, 5 figures, the next month, 0. And the only way they knew to bring money in was when they crashed out to the point of, "How am I gonna pay the rent for my family?" So, we're doing the hypnosis, and we go through this whole thing, and, we're pulling apart threads. So sometimes I do conversational hypnosis. It's not all directed. So we were doing a conversational session, and we're pulling apart all of these threads, and he's telling me about being a little guy, wandered out of the house, was found walking the street, and then about how he got into school and he would have to steal paper for class. And, all of a sudden the tears start running. We're talking, and as I'm pulling at the threads, it finally comes out. He's like, "It's not safe. It's not safe." I said, "What do you mean it's not safe?" "Because if I have it, I'll lose it. And if I just never have it, I know who I need to be." So he knew who he needed to be if he had nothing. his nervous system literally had zero evidence that it of how to be if he had money. So that felt very unsafe. So that's one example. Another example was someone who um, was president of an 8-figure company. Other people were running it, but she was president. And then she had her own business at 7 figures. She was wanting to grow and she was stuck. Like she wasn't going anywhere. We did this work together and it came back to the fact, even though her parents did well, they were not the most well to do on the block. And her parents would talk about how the other people who had all this money, they must not have come by it honest. They must be bad people. And then the parents had a falling out with one of the other families, and that family's daughter happened to be her best friend. So she would have to sneak around to see her best friend, and she always felt like she was a bad person because of that. So in her mind, having money was bad.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes people carry the identity, coming from a wealthy family, that this is the way that you earn money. This is a legitimate way. So if you're dealing with people who are coaches, hypnotists, eh, this type of stuff that we do these days, there's this belief of what's legitimate money.
Yeah.
So we get caught into that. And then sometimes it's just simply being worried about what people are going to think of us that gets in the way of making money. And it has nothing to do with money at all.
Yeah, I feel like that's a question also is you came from such science background and then you're into like hypnosis. And I think about even for me from sales to coach, my family thought I was joining like a cult or something. Like it's so been so crazy. How was that for you to make that change?
So it was interesting when I did my original hypnosis training. I trained with Ron Esslinger. He was a retired captain in the Navy, CRNA. I was getting CE credits for going to take the training. And I remember one day he was walking around the room and he would randomly pick people and have them close their eyes and he would put something in their hands and say, "Tell me the color." And like people were getting the color right. And it was just different colored stones. And I just found it really kind of strange. And then he taught this idea of the relaxing breath. And I mean, it's science based, classical conditioning, Pavlov's dogs. But he taught this relaxing breath. And I remember sitting there thinking, this is such BS. Like, I just don't know about this. And then he recommended Bruce Lipton's book. And I'm like, I have never heard of epigenetics in my life. So that really sent me down the rabbit hole. But most of my clients came from the doctors I worked with when I first started in Connecticut. So I would have to bring the receipts. And I couldn't talk about all of these other things that I had kind of gotten a little wind of in class. I would literally have to talk about the science of it in the research to get people in. And I'm sure most of those doctors now would believe I've completely flown off my rocker because I have clients that I'm helping them follow this feeling back to an earlier time they felt that way. And we find this feeling and I say, okay, let's go to a moment just before you ever had this bad feeling so that we can knock it down and get rid of it. And next thing I know, they've connected with their higher self. They're experiencing their most expansive, infinite self. And people would just think that was totally, totally crazy. But I really didn't lean into that more esoteric side of it until 2018, 2019. But when I'm working with clients, I work within the framework of what they bring to the table. So I don't put my beliefs off on anybody because, there are some fields of hypnosis where it specifically focuses on quantum and super consciousness and these kinds of things. I like to approach it from that scientific, but knowing that it's so much more.
Oh,
That
that's so
scientific. Did I answer your question? Because I went
yeah.
on a tangent.
No. That's great. And you talked about epigenetics, and I think even more basic for me, I had a coach who, when I was introduced to nervous system work, I was like, what's a nervous system? I feel like, especially people listening, right? It's always like go, 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 do, do, do. And it's the hustle and like the uncomfortable. Sometimes that's more comfortable. Sometimes the uncomfortable is to sit and relax. Like in air quotes, I put it.
Yeah. Well, sitting still cannot feel safe because think about it. We're, especially those of us who are Gen X and Gen Z and even millennial, coming up through grade school, we were conditioned that productivity made you a good person. And, I watched my mom be a working mom. And, I grew up in a time where women were expected to run the household, be a great mother, and have the career. And if you're going to school on top of it, like there was just this insurmountable expectation placed upon you. So we get it somehow subconsciously. We absorb this idea that to be good, we have to be productive. So sitting still does feel uncomfortable. And when I left anesthesia to go full time in my business in 2019, I would catch myself in these cycles of nearly burning out. And I would have to force myself to stop. And the most uncomfortable thing in the world, when you're someone who has been a high achiever and you've always been the go getter, the most uncomfortable thing in the world is to tell yourself, no, you are going to stop.
It is. I remember
That
when
is a muscle to
it's,
flex, baby.
yeah, it's so wild because I will also, I guess full transparency, give myself out here. So when I first started, I started with meditation for like a minute, maybe two, and I would even be peeking like, is the timer done yet? Now I'll do like some of the internal family systems work. I'll do your work. Um, and I find when I first started doing yours, I was like, I should just, because I listened to everything in like 2.0 speed. I'm like, I'll do it at 1.25. And I was like, Michelle, that really misses the point. You're not supposed to do that.
Yeah. And it's so important because that is a sign that we're feeling under pressure. And we feel under pressure, fight or flight is activated. And I just want to share some nuggets that your people are going to get because they have some science background and nervous system background. Epigenetics, the, the epigenetics are impacted by stress. And when we're constantly under pressure, even though we think this is normal, our fight or flight is activated. So constantly being under pressure is creating an environment for your body to create disease. When you use hypnosis and you start to go into an alpha state, which alpha is not hypnosis, but we can enter that alpha state when we're in hypnosis, the fight or flight begins to taper off and our parasympathetic nervous system begins to come online. When we go into theta or deep theta, we get full on activation of that parasympathetic nervous system. So many times people say, oh my God, Penny, I feel so heavy. I'm so tired. I'm so sleepy. That's because they've shut off all that adrenaline and their body actually needs to rest. It's one thing to feel a little kind of loopy and tired and fully coming back because you've had a deep relaxation. But when you feel really tired after doing hypnosis and you feel like you need to sleep, that's because your adrenaline has shut off. Hypnosis has been shown to improve heart rate variability, and heart rate variability is directly linked to longevity.
Okay, that is so fascinating because I was going to ask you, I feel like my blood pressure has gone down, but I think when I first started with you, sent a question because I'll do, and I have what most people will say is terrible sleep habits, and I'll do my hypnosis. So I'll get up at like midnight and I'll have some caffeine and I'll do my journaling and my meditating and try and catch up on things. Then I'll go back to sleep around 2:30 or so. But do the hypnosis before I go back to sleep. So there's been times where I actually fall asleep, but I wake up when you say now come back. But I definitely feel different when I'm sitting doing it. But now that you're saying that, like, and then because I fall right to sleep after, like, I'll hear you say come back, I'll turn off the recording, and then I go to sleep for like an hour or two. So that's really making me think about, yeah, adrenaline and cortisol and how that all is impacted. That's interesting.
Yeah. One of the things that I love is that it's, as we're recording this, I don't know when you're going to release it. It's October, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And a couple of years ago, I pulled a study that was a pilot study for women with breast cancer. And I believe they had 40 women, 20 in the control group and 20 in the hypnosis group. And they measured blood levels of cytokines before these women started chemotherapy, halfway through, and then after it was completed. There are two factors that actually support, or believed to support and promote, tumor growth and metastasis. And one of them is I think it's granulocyte stimulating factor and tumor necrosis factor alpha. In the group that had no hypnosis, it matched what they've seen in cancer patients around the world. During chemotherapy, the levels of both of those factors increased. It's almost as if the tumor is fighting to stay alive in the face of the chemotherapy. In the hypnosis group, those levels remained stable. They did not go up. They didn't go away, but they did not go up. So they're calling for a bigger study, and hopefully it's underway because that was released a few years ago. They were calling for a bigger study with more people to see how far this reaches, and they want to do a longevity study to see, does this actually end up impacting actual metastasis? Will people in the hypnosis group have lower rates of metastasis? They don't know. And the other thing they want to explore is, what is it about the hypnosis that triggers the body to do this? Well, most of these studies have hypnosis for relaxation. They're not giving directed commands to heal things. And if that's the case, what has happened is that decreased environment of stress is supporting the body's innate ability to heal. That's my guess. That's an opinion. That's not fact. So please, nobody come at
It
me
makes sense.
and say I'm spreading misinformation. But understanding what I know about hypnosis and the HPA axis and how stress creates disease, that's my hypothesis.
That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, stress we say will kill you. So if you can help to reduce it.
I did a podcast an episode back in May where I talked about It's Always the Nice Ones. Where when I first got out of anesthesia training, and I would be in these rooms with these doctors, and we would have patients with advanced cancers, they would say, yeah, I've known this lady my whole life. I've known her whole family, and God, it's always the nice ones. She would do anything. Well, take It's Always the Nice Ones and translate that into people pleasing, seeking external validation, and fitting in to avoid conflict.
Oh my gosh.
It creates internal stress because we're denying who we really are.
Yeah, that just gave me chills. That is like spot on.
Yeah. So be who you want to be. Nobody, I think it's pretty well established, nobody ever on their deathbed said, I wish I had more money. I wish I could have worked more hours. I wish I had another degree. They say, you know what? I regret not doing the things that mattered most to me. I regret not being with my family. I regret not doing the one thing I always wanted to do, but I was worried that people would think I was crazy for doing it.
Yeah. That is so true. That is the work that I love to do, is that, I talk about wellness and wealth and wild success, but at the end, at the core, it's all defined by you. And I think it's so hard for many women to even give themselves the grace and time to think about what that answer is.
Yeah. A lot of my clients, and I may have one male client a year. It's just the way that it works out. And I have many women who reach out to me. They don't even know who they are. When I have them go through the paperwork to start the sessions and we're talking about who they want to become, they're like, I've been who everybody expected me to be for so long. I don't even know who I am. I don't know what I want. And so
Yeah.
you have to crack that. You have to crack open whatever has created that scenario for there ever to be a glimpse, much less clarity.
Yeah. I know for me, like this work has been great because I, for so long, have identified as Michelle Medtronic. Like I am literally in patients' contacts as Michelle Medtronic. So to try to like unroll that and be like, okay, what is outside of Michelle Medtronic? It's been such an interesting experience.
Yeah, it's become your identity.
Yeah, for sure. If people are listening, is there like one thing? I know you had mentioned earlier, but if there's one takeaway for them or one way for them to get started with this work, and we'll also get to how to connect with you, but is there like a simple step that you would suggest for them to start with?
Oh, there are so many different directions to go. So, trusting yourself. I think you and I had started out talking about trusting yourself. We trust ourselves when we see evidence that we make good decisions. We trust ourselves when we see that we follow through on the things that we want. And when we've been playing into what other people expect of us, and that's become part of a safety mechanism, that's what the brain is filtering for. So we could go through our day and we could have an amazing day, but could forget to do one thing. And if that one thing inside of us, inside of our mind, was really important to feel safe, secure, and accepted, our brain is going to focus on that. So at the end of each day, write down 3 wins for the day. Now, let's say you didn't feel well. You're recovering from the flu, you're okay to work, but you're still not 100% yourself, and the kids are, you know, being chaotic. If you manage to get out of bed and get out of the house and get to work without shouting your head off at your kids, despite the fact that you felt just crummy and yucky, that is a win. Because despite the fact you felt awful, you held it together. Some days as an entrepreneur, my win is that there's a part of my brain that it just doesn't want to do it today, but I manage to get up, get dressed, get in here and do it. That's a win.
Really
The
train
fact that I
your
just
brain.
showed up is a win.
Yeah.
So we take for granted the little things because we put them in the category of, well, that's just expected that I do that. Not everybody does it. There are people who have garbage stacked to the ceilings in their house. you know, I mean, it's only an expectation because you say it's an expectation. You got up, you showed up, you made a choice for yourself. So every night before you go to bed, write out 3 things that were wins. If you have more, go for it. And
That's
so
such a
we
great.
begin to train the brain. Yes, I do make good decisions. Yes, I do make smart decisions. Yes, I do follow through. And I don't have to follow through 100% of the time. Maybe something came up and I have a legitimate reason, and that is okay.
Yeah. So good. Have we missed anything that you want to make sure we get out there also?
Now, I could talk for days, but
Same.
I really don't want to go there.
Same. Where can people find you?
So probably the easiest place is Instagram. It's Penny.Chiasson, Chiasson. And Dr. Ring used to say that Penny has a really strange name. So I remember it by saying Chi ass on. And I remember thinking, I have the strange name. Your name is Ring. But okay, I digress. Um, so there's the website, pennychiasson.com. I have a YouTube channel where I have a mix of training videos. And when I do the podcasts with video, the podcast videos are over there. And yeah, I think if they want to experience a taste of hypnosis and really get into feelings and emotional resonance, I will give you the link to put in there for Resonance
Okay.
2.0. It's a 2-hour masterclass, and my sidekick Tina, who leads people through the hypnosis, she's like, You're only charging $11 for this. This is nuts. It's worth so much more. I said, I know, but there's a lot more on the back end of it. So I want people to just get a taste.
Oh, that's so
That's
great.
what that master class is. So I'll give you that link as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh, I love being here, and I got to talk about pain too. So it's like the intersection of both my worlds.
So great. Okay. Wasn't that great? I hope that some of what you listened to today made you kind of think about everything differently around hypnosis, right? It's not about getting people up on stage and clucking like chickens. It's really, truly doing the work that will make a difference. Remember, I will put the links in the show notes and you can connect with Penny. You can follow her. She has so many different ways to work with her. Be sure to check her out. Okay, friends, as always, thank you so much for being here. That's what I have for you this week. Let's meet back next week. But for now, make it a great day. Take care. Did you know you can take this work to a deeper level with me one-on-one? Go to michelleburkecoaching.com and click on Get Started to begin.